Good morning. This is the February 15th, 2025 noticed meeting of the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers of Nantucket. I'm Peter Halley, the chairman. Let me just run down the list and see that we have a quorum present. So Kathy Baird is here. Scott Ohm, are you here? Not yet.
Not
Patty
yet.
Brewster? Not yet. Gary Beller is here. Michael Cody is here. Peter Kahn is here. Lou Pisano is not here today. Don Green is here. Pamela Swan, is you here?
Yes.
Great. Gene Briscom?
Yeah, Briskman.
Briskman, yes. Donna Martino is here. Lynn Filipski is here. Steve Perlman?
He's here. He's just muted.
Okay, Bill Gardner? And I'm here. Okay, so we have a quorum. I just want to remind everybody, this is a virtual meeting, video. People can see what's in your house and whatever. If you want to keep things private, you can turn off your picture or move things that you want to keep private out of the focal point of your lens. The meeting is being recorded so that anything you say will be preserved and be available for others to see either today or at a later time on the Nantucket channel. We have a pretty big agenda today. Just want to remind people to let me recognize them if they have something to say. We'll go through our committee members first and then members of the public afterwards. Let's see. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda for today?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, good. All those in favor signify.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The minutes of our last meeting, January 4th, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Yep. And a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that passed. So then let's get on to today's agenda. We are fortunate to have both our town manager and our finance director, Libby Gibson, and Brian Turbot with us today. And this was really at a request of the committee to go over and have a better understanding of the capital requirements that the town has currently and in the foreseeable future. I've taken a look at the presentations that were made in November and some of the other times in consideration of the major capital projects, the debt and the tax implications, and it's a pretty, looks like a pretty daunting task, and so I think as non-voting taxpayers, we have some concerns, or may have some concerns, and are interested in what is anticipated and how the costs will be covered. So if Libby and Brian can address that, it'd be great.
And if there's any presentation off the town website you'd like me to put up on the screen, I can do that for you.
I think we might be working off of a presentation that we made to the board, which was a link in your agenda. Is it the link to major capital projects, debt and tax impacts? Brian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
let me get that one for you then. Go ahead and I'll get it for you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's one we want to start with. We reviewed this with the board on November 20th, and since November 20th, a lot of things have happened, including the warrant for the 2025 annual town meeting has now been adopted. We reviewed our general fund budget presentation with the board, and the capital program committee has presented its recommendations for fiscal 26. The select board and the finance committee has voted on a couple of capital articles. And so we're going to take you through all of that. As far as how things get paid for, obviously the primary pay revenue source is property tax revenue. And we have also developed, I don't know if anybody's tried it out, but we have a tax rate calculator online. So if you want to see exactly what the impact is of a particular project, you can input your property information and out will come an estimated tax bill impact. Brian, maybe we can demonstrate that before the end of the meeting, just so people can see how it works. But I would a little caution it that, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but whatever number the tax rate calculator comes up with, it's not a final number. It's only going to be more final when the project funds are actually borrowed, so that we know things like the interest rate and more exact costs. We don't typically always borrow the full amount right off the bat. So that tends to lower it a little bit. And obviously, as the debt window, the debt life moves on, it's not necessarily the same exact amount every year. So there's a bit of modifying that goes on over time with the tax rate impact. So my only caution is don't totally fall in love with that number, because it isn't 100%, but it does give you a good idea of what the project is going to cost over time.
And I would just, Libby, one other thing that just mention is that the tax rate impact calculator that we've created uses the recently approved assessed valuations for 2025 and the and all of the information used to calculate the 2025 tax rate as the base. So over the life of the debt, the assessed valuations for the entire town and everything will change, but it's the most accurate way for us to give people a reasonable understanding of what the impact might be to their property, and is in our opinion, in the best way that we can at this time. So, I mean, there are a lot of variables to it, but we strive to give people an understanding of what the impact could be to their property in as reasonable of a manner as possible.
Thank you, Brian. Much more concise way of what I was trying to say. So this presentation, as you can see, we gave to the board on November 20th, and some things have changed. We'll try to point out what's changed as we go along here. But I think Brian's going to take us through, and I guess if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask them as we go.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
So can you, okay, so Kathy, if you could just move down to the next slide. So what we'll do is we'll take you through the potential 2026 debt exclusions, which now are pretty much finalized for the 2025 annual town meeting. We'll also discuss the out year potential debt exclusions, kind of take you through some of those, and if there's any changes, we'll talk through those. We'll also discuss what our current year general fund debt profile looked like as of June 30th, 2024. And with the potential debt exclusions for fiscal 26, we will try to walk through what we believe the general fund debt profile will look like with the additions of those projected projects being added to those. And we'll also discuss some of the key assumptions that we used along the way in the methodology and the development of those projects and assumptions.
Yeah, Brian, could you take just a second, perhaps,
Sure.
to address the nomenclature like debt exclusion?
Yep.
You know, to
Sure.
you know.
So typically, under the way that under Mass General Law we're allowed to raise revenue from real and personal property taxes. 2.5% is what's known as the Proposition 2.5 levy limit.
Mhm.
If we would like to raise more money outside of the levy limit, there's two ways that we can do it. One is a permanent override, which is included every year in perpetuity. And then there's what's known as a debt exclusion. And a debt exclusion is raised for a particular project. It requires it typically is a borrowing. It requires a successful authorization of the borrowing at an annual or special town meeting. And then it requires a ballot vote to authorize us to raise the cost of that debt outside of the levy limit. And that is only for the life of that debt. Once the debt is paid off, then the authority to raise that is extinguished upon the repayment of the debt. So if you would go down to the next slide, which is the potential debt exclusions for fiscal 2026 at the annual. So the first one, which this has obviously changed a little bit over the course of since this presentation, is Our Island Home, which will be on the annual town meeting warrant in 2025. At the Thursday meeting of the Finance Committee, they did approve a article for $105 million. When we projected this at the November meeting with the select board, it was 96 million. I will just make one note that the trades bids are all out right now, so it's possible that the 105 will actually change as we go through the bidding process, which we're currently in the midst of for the trades and non-trade bids. The contract bid will be due around the middle of March or end of March, with final review early April. So the 105 million could potentially change depending on where trade bids come in. That'll be a good indication of whether that number will be a good number or not. Town employee housing design.
Brian, I'm sorry, before we go on to the next projects, if you want to hear about any of these in more detail, just let us know. There's obviously a lot to say about Our Island Home. And maybe even some of these others, possibly DPW, although that's not coming up at the annual town meeting. So I don't know if you want to hear about that now or we'll hold off till we're further on.
I think hearing a little bit about it now would be good, because that's kind of a very, very large piece of the whole picture.
Yes.
And also, Brian, if you could share with us, in late November, we had a $96 million estimate, and now in mid-February, it's gone to 105 and possibly higher when the bids come in. What happened in that intervening 2 months that had this kind of a 10% swing?
Well, some of that is projection of tariffs that have partially been factored into this. There's partially some changes in the bid landscapes that the contractors have seen. Some of this also takes into account the acquisition of housing or the requirement for housing construction related to the Sherburne Commons site, as well as any negotiations with Sherburne Commons for additional site square footage that we need for the construction of the facility. So some of that at that time was still an unknown, which has become more into focus as we've progressed from this November presentation.
Thank you.
And Donna has her hand up. I don't know if we're doing interactive questions or not.
Yes, I did have a question about Our Island Home. Did I read correctly that FinCom, that the capital program sort of denied it, but FinCom said it's a moral decision to go ahead with it? And if that's the case, Brian, where do you go from here
So
when you disagree?
if I could take that one. The capital program committee, I wouldn't use the word denied it. They did not recommend it. The finance committee is recommending it. However, it was not a unanimous vote, and there was a lot of discussion about this project. So at this point, the motion is positive. So that is what is put forward at town meeting. And I'm quite sure there's going to be a lot of discussion about this. If it's okay, I could give a little overview of the project now, or if you want to take more questions, up to you. Look,
I think that would be okay, because it's, this is gonna be a sort of a major issue. I think it is a major
Sure.
issue for you and for everybody.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a little summarized introduction, and I've done this several times at select board meetings and other community meetings, FinCom the other day. This is a big number. There is no getting around that. And we are well aware of what a big number is. It's the largest capital project the town would ever have approved or undertaken. And we're not taking that lightly at all. So just a little bit of history about this project, because sometimes people's memories of what did and didn't happen in the recent past are a little flawed. At the 2017 annual town meeting, the town proposed acquiring property adjacent to Sherburne Commons, plus an appropriation for a skilled nursing facility that would be constructed on the property to be acquired. Those articles were not approved by voters. In 2018, the select board directed town administration to determine what it would take to construct a new facility at the current site at East Creek Road. Thereafter, between 2019 and 2021, architects were engaged to undertake that analysis. We held a number of charrettes. Stakeholders were interviewed, and other properties close to the current site were reviewed, re-reviewed, evaluated. We consulted with the State Department of Public Health, and analyzed different operating models. At its meeting on August 18th, 2021, the select board voted to pursue a new Our Island Home facility at the Sherburne site, with the current Our Island Home facility to be repurposed for a senior center, and to put forward an article at the 2022 annual town meeting for design for new Island Home facility. We engaged Brenda Johnson, a local person who is very involved in the hospital's construction, to assist with public outreach and to gather and provide feedback and input for a new facility. At the 2022 annual town meeting and election, we had a debt exclusion ballot question and article. Design and associated funds in the amount of $8.5 million was approved. In 2023, our design architect and owner's project manager, which is a required engagement for a project like this, and those two firms were engaged. The board approved a construction manager at risk project delivery method that requires the approval of the State Inspector General's office. That was granted just a little over a year ago. And using that particular process increases the accuracy of cost estimates, because the contracted builder is involved in budgeting phases along the way with the design team, and therefore provides a higher level of cost control. And sidebar on this, as Brian mentioned, the tariffs. We had an Island Home project meeting Wednesday, I think it was. What's today? Saturday? Maybe it was sometime this week, Thursday. And we had a lot of discussion about the potential impact of the tariffs and whether or not they're going to have an impact on this project. The construction manager is contracted to deliver the project at a guaranteed maximum price based on an agreed upon set of construction documents and specifications. And those are pretty well done at this point, subject to some modification here and there. In accordance with statutory requirements, the actual contractor to build the project, Consigli Construction Company, has been selected. And that is the construction manager as well. We have a long-term lease between the town and Sherburne for the Sherburne facility, which is on town property. That lease is subject to an amendment for this facility, and we are at the tail end, hopefully, of negotiations with the Sherburne Board of Directors. We reviewed, at the request of one of the select board members in December, of a 5-year projection of operational costs for the Island Home. There was a request to review what, if any, operational increases there might be as a result of the new facility. And I don't think we're planning on getting deep into that right now. That could definitely be watched online. But other than the cost of the facility, including debt service, the operational costs aren't expected to be very different from what is paid now. So that's just a little overview, and to the extent that we can, Brian and I are happy to answer questions.
So-
And again, I can't overemphasize the amount of the project is a big concern to everybody. I should say one other thing about this. We've had some questions about fundraising. Why can't the town just do some fundraising to pay for this? The town is not in the fundraising business, and it's a questionable expense to engage a professional fundraiser. We have to be very careful about campaign finance laws in the state, and that expenditure could be subject to a lot of scrutiny by the Attorney General's office. So typically for a project like this, you would have a nonprofit that would basically do the fundraising. And there is a group, Friends of Our Island Home, that's out there. And I think they're doing their best to do outreach and spread the word about the project, but they don't have money. And they're trying to, I think, do their own fundraising to help with the outreach for this project. But there isn't it. The town does not have the resources or capacity or perhaps even the legal platform to launch a big fundraising effort for this. And it isn't quite the same as the hospital, where there was a lot of fundraising that was done, but that's a completely different type of organization. So I just wanted to throw that out there because we do keep hearing about that.
Okay.
To the extent, though, that we did get donations, which maybe we would over time offset the cost of this project with those. Sorry.
So a quick question. The current estimate is 105 million. And what has been spent to date on, you went through a sort of litany of a number of different steps. And I take it whatever that number is in addition to the 105 million. It's already spent.
Well, we've spent, Brian, I'm going to say a little over $6 million so far.
To date is, I'm gonna get it. I have it right here, Libby. I just gotta find that. I think it's 4.2 million has been spent to date on the contracts between SMRT and
So there's that, and in 2015, town meeting approved $1 million for some planning and evaluation work, and about 800,000 of that has been spent as well.
Okay.
Without,
you.
I'm sorry. Without going to our individual tax calculators, what is the projected effectively average increase to the tax rate for that project alone?
For this particular for the new one, for the 100, well, it was calculated on 112 million originally. It would add 22 cents per thousand to the tax rate is the calculation.
Per year.
The current tax rate is how much per thousand total?
$3.38 per thousand.
So, okay, good.
Peter?
Yes, Gary.
Yes, thank you. With respect to, first of all, I was very surprised to read in one of the online news things that the Finance Committee approved this, but not on financial grounds, on moral grounds. I thought that's a job for the priests or rabbis or whoever is providing moral guidance to the town. So that certainly suggests to me that even the Finance Committee understands that this makes no financial sense at all. When I read something in the paper as well, it talked about the increase in taxes that would occur, and they were probably talking about the 96 million, maybe the 105, but probably not the final number, because I think what you said is they're waiting for final bids to come in, which I assume, that's one of the questions, Brian, you can answer when I'm finished with my chat here, is will the voters actually know what the final bids are going to be before the town meeting, so they'll know whether it's 105 or 110 or 115 or 20, whatever it might be. But the problem is that if the finance committee looks at that and can't recommend this as a good financial decision for the town, for them to suddenly take the position that on moral grounds it's okay, and therefore we're going to approve it, that I'm not sure even the credit rating agencies are going to be so happy with us if we do something like that. You know, I have been following the progress of the Old Island Home for quite some time, and I must say that it is so gorgeously decorated, and I looked at that and I said, somebody thought about that and asked the architects to come up with a project that would be, if you had all the money in the world, what would you design? Because they've done a absolutely magnificent job in designing something, but whether or not it's appropriate to put that kind of a debt burden on the population of Nantucket is a question that I have. When I read something in the newspapers about the average increase for it, the newspaper article only said that the average increase in taxes for a resident, so that would be including getting the benefit of the 25% discount, would be $700 a year for the next 25 years. So Brian, you can tell us, please, for us folks, the seasonal people who pay, as you know, almost 80 or 9% of the real estate taxes on the island, what would that be to us if it's $700 a year for 25 years for the residents? What can you tell us would cost the seasonal people for that same 25-year period? My final question would be, and I'll stop talking now. If you look at these 3 items or 4 items on the list, $196 million, do you have any concern that our gorgeous AAA credit rating is going to be gone and forgotten for quite some time if we actually get approval for all of these things? Thank you. That's all the questions that I have.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack, and I'm going to do my extreme
Find
best
my
to do
hand. I'm
something.
putting my hand up because I can't.
Somebody, please let me know. So first of all, if the GMP, as we move closer towards annual town meeting, if the total cost of the project with the GMP comes in an estimate higher than the 105, we would have to go back to the FinCom and ask for them to consider reopening the vote and doing an amendment to the article if the warrant had already been printed for an authorization for the new amount. Okay, so that would be the first step. If that was necessary, then myself and my staff would endeavor to have all of the schedules that we've provided publicly or made available publicly to be updated with the new figures so that everybody would be able to access them and see and go to them with the new calculations. And we would endeavor to make all the new estimates available as soon as practicable so that people would have the most up-to-date information as soon as we had it and could make it available. So that would be, and I think that the town manager would certainly want us to do that. We would not want people to have incorrect information going into this vote. So that would be our goal and my intent in respect to what would happen if those numbers changed. What would we do with the calculators? The question about the tax impact for non-year-round residents, the $700 that was mentioned, I think, in the paper, which was asked by one of the FinCom members, that $700 number is actually calculated on an average residential value of $3.196 million. That is not the impact for a year-round resident who has the residential exemption. Okay, so the average year-round residential value is 2,012,000. That for an individual with a year-round residential exemption, for tax purposes, that house would be assessed at 1,185,000, and their tax impact would be $271. So the $700 that made it into the paper was for the average year-round, or average residential value, excuse me, not year-round, of 3.196 million. So that is there's a distinct difference between the two. That is not for, so I think that may not have been correctly relayed in the article in the paper. So hopefully that answers that question.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, then, if that $700, 3.196 million is the average residential, which would include
All in,
around, and
Yes.
so then the number would be even higher for the average non-voting taxpayer.
Well, I mean, I don't, the number could be higher or lower for the non-voting taxpayer to set, depending on what their valuation is, right? If their valuation is less than the average, then it wouldn't be higher than the 700.
Yeah, so I guess people
Yeah.
could look with the information you've just given of the,
Yes.
I'll just round it up to 3.2 million. The individuals who are interested can look at their own current assessment and basically taking that number, make an estimate. Although I will say that estimate, I guess, includes those who have a percent discount, so to speak, on their taxes, and so it might be even slightly higher for those who don't have that discount, because the $700 of blending. I'm getting beyond my math.
So that, I mean, so what I would recommend to everybody is to go to the town meeting page of the town of Nantucket's website and go to the tax impact calculator, because it gives you the ability to put your valuation in and gives you the ability to select whether you are eligible for the residential exemption or not, and will give you the calculation based on your assessed valuation, based on the set of facts that we have loaded into it, including the debt service calculation and the assumptions that we have used to calculate this. So that is the best place to go to get what this may or may not do to your future tax bills.
Yeah. Okay, good. That answers my question and stops me from stumbling over math that I don't understand. So appreciate it.
So to answer the question concerning the AAA tax rate, if all of this were to pass, we have had very brief conversations with Moody's about this. For probably very obvious reasons, they're reluctant to give us a yes or no or an up or down answer that it will or won't impact it. I suspect that it may impact it a little bit. I don't know that it would necessarily be a prime driver to have them remove the AAA or downgrade us. It may give them pause to think about future projects farther down the road, primarily because of just the assessed valuation of the town is very high, and I think they've always, the characteristics of the town have always been very impressive to them, and I think they've always thought that we've been able to support the debt that we've been carrying. We have always been very forthcoming with them and have disclosed all these projects to them, and they've always been calculated into all of the analysis that we've presented and discussed with them, so they do know that they potentially are coming down the road and have been discussed with them. So they are fully aware that they could come to fruition. The impact, I think, at this point is still too early to tell, because the actual timing of the impact of the debt into the tax base will really depend on the landscape of the interest rate landscape when we actually, if and when the projects are approved and construction begins. So if the interest rate landscape doesn't lend to us permanently borrowing on what we had originally thought would be a good timeline, then it could be a longer timeline, which may lend better to keeping the AAA rating. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. So I couldn't give you an absolute answer that we will or won't keep that rating based on all of these projects approving. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but I can tell everyone here that Moody's is fully aware of these projects, and they have not given us an indication that they would be overly concerned if these were all approved.
Okay. So should we move on from our island home? I think I appreciate the explanation of,
We have a lot of hands up, Peter. I don't
Couple of people
wanna-
have hands up.
Oh, okay. I frankly can't see the hands up.
Three of them.
Is Scott and Pam and then Lynn.
I'll fill the silence. Was a study of alternatives done, and if so, is it available?
I could probably dig something out. It was more a review of potential other sites with the theme that we did not want to buy a property. And there weren't really very many properties out there that were already town-owned that would have all of the attributes that would be needed for this, such as sewer and water and enough space, not necessarily near the water, and not also committed to something else. So this was basically the only property that met that criteria. But is there a written report? I doubt it.
Was a private operator and a lease of land to them considered?
Yes, that's been off and on considered for some time. However, a private operator, unless, and we've been told this by private operators, unless they were to own the land, they are not interested in running the facility because it is not a moneymaker. Unless they can turn it into something that's different from the way it operates now. And they would most likely sell the property.
After 40 or 50 years or something like that? That's what they're.
Well, I don't know when, but every discussion I've had with a private operator who's expressed interest in the facility has said, we would only do this if we could own the land. And I assume they would at some point sell it, whether it's sooner or later, and then lease the land. I don't know if they would lease it or what, but it's not a moneymaker, so they have never been interested in keeping it going.
Thank you.
I think I'm next. Libby, I want to applaud you guys for considering the moral implications. This is something that to a family that requires skilled nursing for a loved one would just be an insurmountable task to move someone off island, the logistics, the cost, etc. But correct me if I'm wrong. So this is licensed as a skilled nursing facility. Do they also take people who just need assisted living, or is it truly skilled nursing?
It's intended to be truly skilled nursing.
Okay. So what's the average amount of time someone actually spends there? Like, do people live there for years?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it's interesting because I'm pretty familiar with the private operator side, and they will usually have an independent living area, supply some assisted living, and skilled nursing is sort of, 20% of the people end up there and they don't last that long once they're at that point. So this is a very specialized kind of feel. And I just really feel for the families on Nantucket who need these kinds of services if they're not provided on island. And I just want to say that I'm glad you're thinking about the moral implications. And, somewhere down the line, maybe a private operator would be interested, but my sense is that they would want the land to build a facility that would have some independent living or some assisted living where they could sell those units or lease them to people, collect a monthly fee for those people living there. And that kind of offsets some of the cost of operating the skilled nursing.
Pamela, thank you for that. You said that a lot better than I did. And the site where the island home is now is not big enough for it.
Right.
I just have a question. I really appreciate the over 200 years that Nantucket has taken care of their own, whether it's a smallpox hospital on Coatue or the asylum at Quays. This is a Quaker heritage that runs very deep on the island to take care of each other. Outside of the potential debt exclusions, I remember also reading that the cost would be built in for about $1 million a year to underwrite the operating costs once this is up and going, but also trying to find other income that could offset that, including hospital patients who come out of Nantucket or surgery on island where they could do rehab here as part of the skilled nursing set. Are there ways that the town has thought of how to cut the cost of underwriting this facility once it's built?
Lynn, that's a very good question. I don't think cut the cost is all that feasible. However, offsetting it with some of those services that you're talking about are possible. We have had a lot of so right now the island, we engage a firm called Eisenstein Flaherty Associates who runs skilled nursing facilities in other areas of the state and New England. And they've been examining the operation. They've actually helped us improve our reimbursement rates and collection of the reimbursement rates. So revenue has increased somewhat. However, they are not cheap. And so we have to pay them, and but the increased revenue helps offset that cost. The idea of the new facility, though, I would say isn't to offer lots of other services that are going to require additional employees that need to be housed and they need to be specialized and all of that. But to the extent that there is space to offer some of what you're saying, short-term rehab, for example, is a good one. We would definitely be pursuing that. And we are doing that even now with the current facility.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if you have this answer, Libby. What percentage of the beds are actually occupied typically, and what portion of the residents are market rate versus Mass Health reimbursement? Because that's one way of, I know my experience with skilled nursing facilities is that you need to get market rate customers to offset the Mass Health reimbursement customers who generally are reimbursed at under less than your costs.
Mm-hmm. Brian, do you recall what was said the other day about this? We were discussing the census and the census mix. And I think there was, I don't know, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I can get it for you, the exact percentage of private pay versus the other categories. Private pay tends to be not as much as the other categories. And I don't know if anybody's been in the island home lately. I would urge you to go take a look at it if you would like to. It is not in compliance with current Department of Public Health standards or regulations. And I'm just going to say it's not really attractive on the inside. So
I
I think,
think the current census right now that he said at the steering committee meeting was 43, Libby, and I think it was either 2 or 3 were market rate private pay, and the rest was a mix of Mass Health and other insurance sets.
Our market rate private pay, potential residents, are they going elsewhere? The picture that I'm getting, and this is not my area of expertise, is that you have an extremely high percentage of skilled nursing people in this facility, but it may be that are there people who really don't require skilled nursing that are now resident there? Our market rate customers, if you know, going off island to other kinds of facilities.
so the skilled nursing is, as I understand it, divided into various levels of acuity depending on what the patient needs. And is there anybody there who does not require skilled nursing? There might be one, but there's a criteria checklist that is applied to everyone who is seeking to be a patient or a resident there, and they need to meet the requirements. So I would say that they've all met the requirements at some level of skilled nursing care. Where are the private pay people going? I'm not sure. I think there are, if people have the means, they have home health that maybe provides them care in their own home, and that's a side thing that we've talked about, but it's obviously pretty costly.
In the crazy ideas category, two questions, I guess. One, to what extent, if any, my understanding is the existing hospital is not using all of its capacity, so that is obviously a skilled nursing facility. To what extent, if any, can they pick up some slack? And second, to what extent can we incentivize? What can the town do? I mean, if this idea of assisted living, which many of us are unfortunately familiar with, given our age and those of our aging parents, as someone pointed out, the ability to pick up some of the costs by the housing when you're not needing the skilled nursing portion is helpful. To what extent can the town incentivize by either giving or land or whatever to these private developers to do that? And that may well include, working with the land bank or whatever. If the town itself doesn't have existing land, we obviously have plenty of land on the island that would otherwise possibly be available.
With regard to the first question, couldn't the hospital take some skilled nursing patients? I'm going to say no. They are not a skilled nursing facility. They are a hospital, and the requirements are different. They seem similar because they all have nurses, but they're not the same thing. And very early on, when the hospital, prior to the new hospital being built, there was discussion with them about, can't you just take this on and build a nursing home wherever? And it was a resounding no. We're also dealing obviously with a large corporation that is, we just saw, doing a lot of cuts. We basically already are leasing town land to a group, Sherburne Commons, that built what was intended originally to be an assisted living facility. They have since dropped their assisted living certification and have a firm that they contract with to provide some services to residents who need them there. But that we've done that.
Well,
yep.
And I mean, I guess the question is, I don't know what the terms of the deal were, but obviously they didn't live up to the assisted living portion isn't functioning, is it? I mean, is it? It's not functioning to the extent of taking on skilled nursing.
Well, assisted living and skilled nursing
Are different.
No, but what I was thinking of was that you have different levels, right? I mean, you have normally, or in many ways, you have the different levels, and ultimately, the top level requires skilled nursing.
Assisted living has nothing to do with skilled nursing. Skilled nursing is a different category, and they
Right.
each have different levels.
Right.
That is true. But I can't really answer as to why, I certainly don't want to speak for Sherman Commons as to why they are not currently operating as an assisted living facility. Maybe that is something they would look into in the future. I really don't know. But I guess the point is, if there was a market out there for an assisted living facility, somebody would be building it or have already built it. And that's, again, what.
Yeah, I suspect there wasn't enough demand
Right.
for assisted living, and unless you have a certain minimum number, a dozen patients or whatever it might be, you can't afford to do it, and that was probably the case.
But there's no market. That's the same argument holds for the fact that there only, there's not a necessarily a market for skilled care level. I mean, we're only talking about a very few number of people, right?
Well, that's where I think we run into the moral issue. There is a need. Forget the word market for this time being. There is a need for skilled nursing on Nantucket, but it's not apparently a large enough need so that private suppliers of these services are flocking to the island to provide them. And that seems to be the quandary that raises the moral question for the people on the island. And that is a question that it seems to me is going to be answered by the town meeting. And as I understand it, this is a double vote type of thing where it has to pass the town meeting and a ballot type of vote. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that's in a way, all we can do is provide advice, but the people on the island who live there year round have to make this moral judgment. So are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I
James.
just have one, Peter.
Yeah.
I had thought that the annual operating loss of the current facility was over $5 million a year, and that with the new facility, that 5 million will continue to be sort of the bogey number, but on top of it, there'll be another 10 million a year of interest payments or paying down the debt payments, whatever it might be. That 5 number, because somebody just mentioned $1 million, and I wasn't sure which it is.
So when we were asked by Select Board Member McNabb to put together the 5-year operating lookout from fiscal 26 to fiscal 30, the projection was that it would remain roughly consistent between 5.6 million to 5.8 million over the next 5 years. So that does remain roughly consistent at about somewhere between 5.6 and 5.8, growing slightly a little bit depending on the year and the needs of the facility, but not getting extremely large over the next 5 years. The only change is when we add in when you account for the additional debt service and principal. Obviously, we did the calculation on a level debt service calculation, so it added about $8.5 million in debt service, and that obviously would create about a roughly $14.5 million cash contribution towards the operations of the facility from the general fund once that additional debt service was added on top, added as well.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Does that answer your question?
Per
Yes,
year?
thank you.
Per year?
Per
per
year.
year for 25 years, once we added if this were to pass, once the debts and permanent borrowing was added, that would be for 25 years, is the way we amortize the borrowing on the construction of the facility.
Yeah, so just 15 and change per year over 15 years.
25 years, and then the
25
5 year,
years.
roughly five, I'll just use roughly $5.5 million contribution for operations is in continuation even after the 25 years. That goes on as long as the facility continues to operate.
And that would have a increase due to cost situations,
I have a quick
consumer
process
price
question.
index or whatever.
I'm sorry, I have one last process question. I'm sorry. I just want to understand if the finance committee, and it sounds like they may get it back again because the numbers may be going up beyond the 105 million that they voted on. If the finance committee votes against this, does that take it away from the town meeting, or is it still, it's still up? Is it still up to the voters? And second, if the finance committee does vote, if it's not revisited by the finance committee and their vote stands, has town council been asked to look at whether or not a finance committee vote based on non-finance issues? In other words, when they have announced that it is a moral, that they are voting as a moral issue, is that beyond the scope of their purview, and therefore the vote itself is questionable or not valid?
The finance committee's motion is simply that, a motion. They are not voting whether or not this project will be approved. That is up to the voters, and it basically can be for just about any reason.
Okay, but so that I guess what you're saying is that whether they voted for or against, it doesn't make any difference. It goes to the town meeting. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, have we exhausted this part of the capital budget, potential capital budget? Sounds like we have, and there's still a lot more, and maybe we can go through the other big ticket items, and then at the end of the day, I kind of have this overriding question as to the unknown unknowns, which may be impossible to answer, and that's why they're unknown. But to me, most of it has to do with climate change issues, and are we, appropriately, factoring those in as we look forward. So thank you. Please continue.
So Brian, I think Brian is going to take us through the next couple. I would point out that I don't think we're totally prepared to spend a lot of time on the DPW facility construction. We might be able to answer some basic questions. There is an informational session coming up, remote and online for the DPW facility, and it's on. You can remote in. It's on March 6th at 5:30. And again, that is not coming up before the annual town meeting. So thank you. I want to just add, Peter, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. We appreciate all of these comments about the Island Home. It is a huge struggle for the town's elected officials and staff to put this forward, because from a strictly financial view, I don't think we disagree with any of what's said. It does not make sense. It is not a typical municipal function. However, there are other reasons why people want to keep it alive on the island. Brian, you want to take us through the town employee housing?
Sure. The next one on the town meeting warrant in 2025 is town employee housing, design and construction in the amount of $14 million. This would create 9 units of municipal employee housing on Waite Drive. It would consist of 3 single-family homes and 3 duplexes, creating up to 25 bedrooms. We've estimated the total construction cost along 3 lots on Waite Drive to be $12.3 million, with design, OPM, and other permitting costs to be $1.7 million. I'm sure as everyone on the call or on the meeting is aware, housing for municipal employees is becoming a challenge as we continue to expand or as people transition and we hire new employees. Housing has become a challenge for us to find to have as well. So this will go a long way towards alleviating some of those challenges that we have in retaining and attracting employees. Tom Nevers multi-use path supplemental funding. We do have currently had funding for design. That design is currently nearing completion. This will be going out to bid very soon. The estimate is for a little bit below this. There is some contingency in this number, but the number is for $6,853,706. That's an estimate that has been prepared, vetted by our transportation planner and DPW director, and they are very comfortable with that number. That will be not only a warrant article, but it is also a ballot question as well. As the town manager mentioned, the DPW facility construction, this is expected to be at a special town meeting. It is expected to be in 2025, so it would potentially be 26. It'll be a debt exclusion, 80 million, all told for fiscal 26, 196,853,000 in potential debt exclusions. Is there any question on the other three that we can and any of the members have?
I just have.
Yes,
one
just
quick
quickly,
question.
I went on a tax calculator that you suggested we do while we were talking, and do I, and
Did
so
it work?
if I see it, if I understand correctly, yeah, it worked. The DPW facility, though, is not weighing in at, it's much less than the 80 million that's being projected there. Is there some is that because it hasn't been, it won't be approved until a special town meeting or what? I'm not quite sure I understand. As opposed to the RI on Hope, which is weighing in at the full, the full 105 or 96, whatever it is.
Let me look here. So what you have, and that's a great question, Peter, and we should probably make that note. So what is on the annual town meeting warrant in May is supplemental funding for design, which is 1.2 million. That 80 million is not on that tax calculator because that is not on the annual town meeting warrant. That's a great question. So that's why that's a calculator only for that 1.2 million that is on the warrant.
So arguably your taxes for, your tax increase for 2020, whatever, tax year 2026 would be higher than the tax calculator. Is that fair to say?
This actually, the DPW construction would not likely hit your tax bill if it was approved at the special. It would likely not hit your tax bill until 28 or 29. And this is really only to give you a very rough estimate of what it might look like in the future. And there's a lot of factors that go into when these ultimately end up on your tax bill. We try to look at when debt will be falling off. We try to time some of that to minimize that impact. We also look at, we work very closely with our financial advisor to try to look at the best time to add this in an interest rate environment and try to size the debt to get the best rate and get the most interest and get the most competition. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. So it could be approved in 2025. All of these projects could be approved in 2025, and due to timing, we may decide to not permanently borrow these for a longer period than we originally estimated, and it may delay the impact. So what we try to do is give you an idea of what it could look like. It's not a certainty that they will be added immediately as we've projected. It's just the best that we can do at this time.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, and really the purpose of this meeting is not to calculate our tax bills year by year for the next 10 years. It's rather to get an overall high-level view of what's coming down the path that is highly likely that may affect these, our tax burden going forward. But the precision is what we want is, I think, more precision in making making sure that the town and we've identified all the big capital expenditures that are likely to be needed to keep the place running as it's been running in the past in tip-top shape.
Peter, I just wonder, what is the $80 million facility for? I mean, it's more than offices, obviously. Well, what's included in the $80 million? What sorts of functions?
It would be basically moving the entire public works operation, excluding the solid waste facility, out to this mid-island area, and it would have a garage, maintenance facility. The garage would enable the equipment to be kept undercover, which largely it is not right now. Administrative offices, space for training, wash downs, and that's very high level. There's a salt shed. I'm just going off the top of my head. Those basic public works type
Yeah, the
functions.
mechanic
that-
shop, too, Libby.
The maintenance garage, yep. There a lot of these things that are typical in municipal public works facility are not in the condition that you would want for a community of our size. They're old, they're outdated, they're falling apart. And the other issue is that sea level rise projections indicate that some of the area roadways on Matticat Road will be much more subject to flooding as time goes on. And some of those projections are in the, I don't know what people think nearest future is, but in the next 20 to 30 to 50 years. And the thinking is we should move the facility to this other area, which of course adds to the cost as well. But we have discussed rebuilding it where it is with all the updated functions. It could fit there. There's a cost to rebuilding in place, of course. And the sea level projection and flooding projections really tipped us to this location. But there is a lot to the facility besides, I don't know, one building.
Thank you.
Hey, Peter, I have one quick question. Living out in Tom Nevers and having followed and pushed to have the Tom Nevers bike path move forward in the process, it's been many, many years. I think I heard in the FinCom meeting that that number that's there's some new information or new cost numbers. Is this the new number, or is this the number that was originally in the warrant?
So that's a great question, Kathy. This was the number that was originally proposed, approved by Capcom. And yes, during the meeting on Thursday, it was originally suggested that this might need to change. However, after a deeper, more in-depth discussion between the DPW director and the transportation planner, they did go back, re-review it, and they are actually comfortable that this number does meet the requirements and will be sufficient to construct the bike path, and that there will not be any additional funding necessary.
Thank you very much.
Great.
You want me to put the slide down?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
If it's okay, Peter, I mean, this is a pretty exhaustive list here. It goes out over from 27 to 35. It's 435 million. I'm not going to take everybody through every project if that's okay. It's a lot of work with all the department heads to identify some large scale projects. Every year we go through this process with them and put it into the 10-year plan. Every year they move around based on what's happened at town meeting and what gets approved or doesn't get approved. This list will likely change over the years, but currently as the list has been comprised and as the group has seen in the 10-year plan, we've pulled these high profile projects out and they total $435 million of potential out year exclusions over the next 10 or 11 years. If there's questions, we're happy to answer any, but I don't know if you want me to go through every project.
No, I certainly don't. Are
I have
there
a-
any
I have a
questions?
question.
But just,
My question is, I don't know anything about the cable and I wasn't there for the blackout. But where in all this is, how much are we indebted for to keep the lights on and generators moving so that we don't have the blackout that we experienced? And I don't see anything addressing that future concern.
So I'm just gonna say that the power outage, if you're referring to the one that happened over Christmas stroll, had nothing to do with the cable at all. Cables. It had to do with an underground wire that had a malfunction and was repaired as quickly as possible. The cable, there have been discussions about the possibility of a third cable, but that is really a national grid initiative, not a town initiative, although our energy coordinator certainly is kept apprised of what their planning is. They are doing some infrastructure improvements. They have been over the past 3 or 4 years. They're about to start one, I think, this spring to improve some of their underground infrastructure, maybe above ground too. But that I would want somebody else to speak on that, but that it's not a town expense.
Not at all. Okay. And no generators or anything like that for backup?
There's a battery powered facility out near the airport that can power the island in a rolling sort of a situation for a period of time. But actual fossil fuel powered generators are not really, I guess, where those things get powered from.
Okay. Thank you.
given the size of the given the size of the Steamboat Wharf and importance of that project, could someone just give us a quick high-level view of the timing of that, and to what extent is the town liable for this as opposed to the authority? Just curious about that.
Yeah, this is very much in the preliminary planning stages. Brian and I have been a kind of higher level involved. But the this is also a multi-phase or multi-component project. And first off, we're dealing right now with Easy Street, which is more and more becoming subject to flooding, and we're looking at a harbor, what's it called, Brian? Downtown
Flood barrier.
harbor, downtown flood barrier, thank you, which would be constructed out in the water. Also fortifying the bulkhead that's there and making sure the bulkheads all around it are fortified, maybe raised. The wharf itself, we have started conversations with the Steamship Authority. They are also doing long-term coastal resiliency types of planning. There's a property that we're both looking at, maybe in conjunction with the land bank, to acquire 31 Easy Street, the former Arno, well, not former, the current Arno property, used to be a restaurant there. So it's all very much underway. We're looking at grants. I'm not really sure exactly what the timing is for this, and whether or not the town itself would be on the hook for $120 million for this. Certainly there will be something, but it's really sort of unfolding in the next couple years. We have
I
had
just want to get a
some,
sense. Thank you.
sure, we've had some public informational sessions on this and other coastal resilience projects. And I think there's a lot of information online about it. So I would encourage people to go check that out. Also, I don't know if have you had coastal resilience coordinator come to one of your meetings? Leah Hill?
Not recently. I know Gary.
Okay.
Gary's our representative.
That's right. Yes.
It's probably time for us to have one of the coastal resilience people visit with us.
She's on our list of people to ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this slide here currently up on the screen just shows that as of June 30th, 2024, the most recent completed fiscal year, the general fund debt profile, we currently had 174 million in debt outstanding. It was made up of 27 million, which would be paid within Proposition 2.5. There's 147 million that is raised in taxes outside of the Proposition 2.5 levy limit. By the end of 2035, which is the 10-year capital plan that we have here, the 71% of that debt service will have been fully amortized. And if we took on no debt at all, now, by 2024, the current debt of 174 million would be fully amortized by the year 2044, which is one of the reasons, to your previous questions, Gary, one of the things that Moody's has always liked is that the relatively 174 million certainly is a lot of money, but when the way that Moody's looks at it compared to assessed valuation and as a percent of revenues, on an annual basis, Moody's has always been very impressed and thinks that it's a very manageable amount of debt on an annual basis. So that's one of the things that they've always commented on.
Just Brian, one question on that slide. Is the percentage on Nantucket, our percentages within Proposition 2.5%, 27 million, and excluded is 147. So huge bulk of it is outside of the Proposition 2.5. Are the other municipalities in the state of Massachusetts similar in makeup? In other words, are we unique in that because of the unique character of Nantucket, we have that kind of a makeup of the funding, which is only a small portion within 2.5%, and the great bulk of it outside of it? Is that the way the rest of Massachusetts municipalities fund their operations, or are we somewhat unique?
I think we're probably in the middle, to be honest with you, Gary. I think, cities generally don't use a lot of debt exclusions. Towns generally, smaller towns don't. Larger towns like us that have the ability do try to finance some or more expensive projects with debt exclusions. Within that 147 million, it's made up of some rather large projects. The new middle school is in there. The Nantucket Harbor Shimo project is in there. Those two projects are rather large projects that are included in there. The new fire station is in there. The police station is actually almost fully paid off at this time, but that's in there. So there's some rather large projects in there. And most communities, for rather very large scale projects, they do finance them through Proposition 2.5 debt exclusions.
Thank you.
Kathy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I would appreciate it. So based on the current debt profile, it just shows that the debt calculation and payments between 25 and 35, obviously as the debt amortizes, the payments are going down, which is one of the good things that it certainly puts some less with the majority, of our payments being in the debt exclusion category. It certainly has an impact as we go through between 25 and 35 on the tax rate if we were not to add any more debt exclusions. Continue down to the next slide. Now, when we put this together, this has dramatically changed, obviously, because when we put this together in the run-up to the November 20th meeting, we did not have the tax rate set. So what we did here was try to do our best guess as what the 2025 tax bill was going to look like with the information we had prior to November 20th. In December, the select board adopted the split and the residential exemption, and then ultimately DOR approved our recap sheet, and ultimately the tax rate was set. So most of this information has changed, but it's still fairly close to what I think it still is a reasonable estimate of where it all ended up for 2025. Next slide, please, Kathy. So for all of this, the projection and the assumptions, they were all based on 24 values as certified by the Bureau of Local Assessment, because at the timing of this, the 25 values had not been certified. And we had made no change in the assumption that for the residential exemption, we kept that at 25%. All debt was amortized over 25 years. We can amortize most, if not all of this debt over 30 years. And with a vote of the select board, we could go longer if we determine that the useful life of a project is longer than 30 years, say, for instance, potentially the Island Home. Typically, we've gone somewhere between 20 and 25 years on most of our debt. And then the debt was calculated at 4.5% interest, which was in a lengthy discussion with our financial advisors back in September and October. We took a rather conservative approach. Most of the debt that we have sold has always done better than any of the rates that we've estimated in the conservative approaches that we've taken. Most of the time when we go into market and sell, we get very competitive bids. We generate a lot of interest, and we generally see some of the best rates that our financial advisor, Hilltop Securities, sees when we go into the market. So we took a conservative approach just because we were uncertain at the time, but we do believe ultimately when we go to market, we'll see better rates than what we've projected in these presentations. Next slide, please. So we wanted to make sure when we gave this presentation to the select board and when we presented this to the public that people really did have the ability to see what may happen if all of these projects were approved. So if all of these projects were approved at the annual town meeting in 2025, we assumed that on June 30th, 2027, if they were all completed, we would have, if market conditions and timing was correct, we would have permanently borrowed the debt. So on June 30th, 2027, if we had permanently borrowed all three of the projects that were at the annual town meeting in May of 2025, which was Island Home, Town Employee Housing, and Tom Nevers Bike Path, the debt would have gone to $328,103,000 as of June 30th, 2027, both within Proposition 2.5 and excluded. Excluded would go from $111 million, which takes into account any amortization and payoffs between June of 24 through June of 27 to $308 million. As most of you know, the three projects were proposed as debt exclusions. Next slide, please, Kathy. This slide shows the debt profile payments because the debt, even though it would be on the books on June 30th of 2027, the first payment actually would not have been due till fiscal year 28 due to the timing and the way we structure the debt. So this just shows the sliding scale of payments beginning in fiscal 28 and for the next 10 years. Next slide. Here we tried to create a bar graph to really kind of just give people an estimate. Again, very high level estimate of what we thought the debt might look like in 28. It's really difficult to project what it might look like in 25. So as you can all imagine, what it would be the difficulty in trying to project what all that debt might look like in 28. But we did want people to have an understanding with that debt being added, what it might look like. Next slide, please, Kathy. We made an attempt with using all of the same assumptions of what somebody's tax bill might look like in 28 so that they could see what it might look like using the asset. And we did do the calculation for the year-round home here. Next slide, please. And this slide merely for the debt profile merely adds the DPW, assuming that it was passed at a special town meeting in 2025. As you can see, would have added the 80 million. So our debt profile would increase to $439 million of outstanding debt as of June 30th of 2028. Which, as you can see, in fiscal 29 would have added an additional $4 million of payments, taking us down in 2038 to total debt service payments in the general fund of $21 million annually. And this slide, and then down to the next slide, Kathy, just projecting what the impact on the tax rate would be for each of the projects, and then a projection of what the tax bill would look like. Next slide, Kathy. obviously, as we tried to do this, there were some unknowns that we were trying to work within. Our island home, any financial offsets, any grants that may be out there. We looked at various low interest loan project potential programs like HUD. Some of those project potential programs may have been available, but the timing did not line up with that. We did talk to some people, and the length of time to progress through them just would not work with our project. We do get what's known as certified public expenditures. We get that every year. It does help offset some of the cost of running the facility. There is a discussion about whether we could use some of that to offset some of the debt service for the project. That would really be a policy discussion for the board. We did present that to them as a potential option. For one of the other projects on the list for Baxter Road or for the sewer projects, sewer betterments in the needs extension areas, Baxter Road alternative access, possibly betterments, residential exemption increase. And I think the one that we highlighted in red, I think is the one that, for me, in discussion with our financial advisors, is the one that has the potential to be the most impactful to all of the projects that we're talking about in 25 and all of the future projects. We've had lengthy discussions with our financial advisors, and there's a growing concern that there could be a change in the tax code, which would have a very negative impact on municipalities. Currently, most, if not all, with the few minor exceptions, all of the debt that we sell is exempt, is tax exempt to the purchaser for the interest that they earn on an annual basis. There's a growing concern. This has been tried a few different times under various administrations, but there's a growing concern that this actually may be the year that this municipal tax exemption is actually removed. And if it is removed, it could potentially add anywhere between 1.5% to 2% increase in the interest rate that we pay on all of our debt, which would add tens of millions of dollars in interest to every single project on a go-forward basis, which would be very impactful to us and to every community, but it would be impactful to us in many ways. And I don't, sure Libby may have some others that she may want to address that we didn't put in here, but I'll turn it over to her if she does.
Brian, just a quick question, on the residential exemption increase, are they contemplating decreasing the amount that residents pay in taxes or increasing it? Because right now, I understand it's a 25% discount. Given everything that we want to do, is it contemplated that they would give them a greater discount, therefore pushing more of this onto the non-resident taxpayers?
That's really a policy discussion that they've had discussion about. They could go up to 35%, and I believe with the seasonal community designation, it allows them to go further or higher. However, one thing that everybody has to remember is that it doesn't push any more to the non-resident taxpayer, okay? It shifts the tax rate in the residential class. So the residential exemption takes the tax rate in the residential class and shifts it a little bit higher. So if you get the residential exemption, you're paying the higher residential tax rate. So it doesn't make a non-resident tax rate higher. There's one residential tax rate regardless. The residential exemption merely makes the residential tax rate higher. That's all it does. But it just lowers the value that the resident is paying on an assessed valuation. So it doesn't make one.
All right, maybe
rate.
I missed, but I just want to understand if there were only two taxpayers on Nantucket, one resident and one non-resident, and you had $100 tax bill, the resident would pay $75 and the non-resident would pay $100. Is that still correct?
if you had $100 tax bill.
Well, no,
I gotta think-
if you had $100 of taxes today that was due, and you
Mhm.
had two taxpayers, one would pay 50% times 100%, and one would pay 50% times 75%. Is that the correct way to look at the tax burden between the residents and the non-residents?
Oh, God, you're gonna put me on the spot and think this through, aren't you?
No, I'm not, I'm just trying to understand, because look, I understand we've got some tremendous projects that all are worthy coming down the road. But we're talking about, if all of these are approved, quintupling our debt rate. And we're taking more and more taxable land out of circulation, whether it's for conservation, whether it's the land bank, what have you, or the federal government. That burden is going to go heavily on non-resident taxpayers. So I'm just trying to understand how you think about it from a policy point of view.
Well, I mean, the assessor will, yeah, the select board has discussed it. I don't want to try to answer for them, to be honest with you. I
Okay.
think that's within their purview. The assessor will put forward any analysis that they ask for to make that decision, to be honest. So I don't want to try to put words in their mouth or make that decision for them.
So as I understand the history of this committee, it was established at or about the time that the residential discount, the year-round residential discount, was created. And it was established in part because there was some concern that a shifting tax burden would create problems for people deciding to buy on Nantucket and all the rest of it. And so we're still around after all these years, and it looks like these issues are still percolating, as one would expect they would have. And part of our reason for being is to, I guess, give advice on shifting tax burdens. If my history is correct in terms of this committee, Michael, I think if I were to ask the same question, because I think I understand what you're asking, is that my understanding is the millage rate. We're basically talking about the millage rate. You have a budget, and you say, okay, these are the number of dollars we have to raise by through the real estate tax, and you set a millage rate based on the assessments that will cover that. I'll just stop and say, is that a sort of correct understanding in general of how and then within this this process, if you give one class of taxpayers a discount, in this case a 25% discount, the budget is still the budget. And so how it's carved up between year-round taxpayers and or year-round residents and non-year-round residents has to shift in some way. Although the tax rate, I guess, stays the same, the burden somehow shifts to those who don't get the discount. Is that correct, or am I missing something in the calculation?
Well, the burden,
nothing to do with
but
policy. It just has to do with mechanics.
It doesn't shift because you're all in the same class, right? You're all in the same residential class.
Right.
The amount of the exemption is not calculated, but so the rate rises for everybody. Okay. So it doesn't shift the rate shifts to everybody, not to the non-resident versus the resident. The only thing that changes is the residents are assessed on a lower value. So that means the rate has to go up for everybody. So if you had no residential exemption, let's just say that the rate would have been $3.20 for everybody, but with the residential exemption, the rate becomes $3.22 for everybody.
I've got it. I've got it.
Okay.
The
So
way
because you're all in the residential class, so the residential exemption removes assessed value from the residential class, so therefore the rate changes for everybody.
Yeah, mechanically what happens is that it's the property, in theory, the ownership of the property by a year-round resident puts the property in it's still, real estate, but the property itself gets a 25% reduction of its assessment vis-a-vis the tax bill. Is that right? Is that kind of the way it works?
For tax calculation purposes,
Yeah.
correct.
Whereas other people don't get that. And then okay, I think I understand it.
Peter,
So, yeah.
Peter, Libby has I have something to say, but Libby has a hand up too. So I defer to Libby.
Mhm.
First.
I was going to defer to you.
Gary, you're on.
My comment is Brian, the one thing that when you're looking at the chart for unknowns, and looking at all the slides, there are only 2 items that I see that really suggest the long-term needs that we will have for financing because of climate change. And that is, you have a reference to the Baxter Road alternative access here. And also when we're talking about the Steamboat Wharf. But what I think is something that really should be, at least in the unknowns, we're going to have a lot of expenses based on our needs because of climate change, the continued erosion of the shoreline of Nantucket, rising water. And so somewhere we're going to have to find a way to start long-term financing. The Steamboat Wharf, the problem with the ferry terminal is that we only have 9 years before we start getting problems with the ferry dispatching people to the current location, and they know about it. And with the next project on their schedule, but it's probably 3 to 5 years off. But there are a lot of other projects for saving some of the important places downtown and other parts of the island that are going to need funding. And somehow, I think it ought to be in their unknowns. There ought to be some line item that says we're going to have to figure out some way to take care of those needs arising from climate change, some of which, most of which are already mentioned in the current plan that we produced for the village, for the town.
Yeah. I would add to that the sort of it's not an unknown with respect to future capital expenditures, but rather it's an unknown as to future income. And that has to do with, again, climate change and the elimination, perhaps, of whole areas of coastal real estate that are now, very, very valuable and therefore have very, very high tax contributions, but may be underwater in the not too distant future, or less desirable than people believe them to be today. And I'm wondering, when one looks at this whole sort of future situation, if how the town, if it is factoring in the sort of valuation of the real estate. Right now, it has a huge valuation compared to almost any other town in the United States. And it could be more scarcity increases the value of what's left, or people at some point, because the ferry wharf has not been done in a timely fashion can't get here, and it decreases the value. I'm just wondering whether those unknowns are at least being thought about, and if at all there's some value included or excluded going forward.
I think the coastal resiliency coordinator could speak best to that.
Yeah. We will try to get that person at some point. I mean, it's kind of the future that's not very welcoming, but we'll go there for more information on that. So do other folks have more questions? Libby and Brian have been extremely generous with their time and expertise this morning, and I really appreciate their coming and speaking with us, and I appreciate the very good questions that members of the committee have asked. I don't know if there are any other questions at this point.
Peter, I just had one kind of random idea here that might be worth pursuing relative to the island home. The churches on Nantucket are very generous, and they already have the charitable 501(c)s in place. Have we thought of partnering with the Council of Churches for this moral impact that would help raise funds that would defray some of the costs and make this a Nantucket-wide, and I don't know how many churches there are, but there are probably 10 or 15 churches that might want to get involved in this, because it does serve all the citizens of Nantucket. And to all the earlier discussions, it is a bit of a moral dilemma, because you're on an isolated remote island. So it's not like you can go visit people if they're parked in, Boston or Worcester or Springfield. And I'm just wondering, have we pursued that level of dialogue with the churches?
No, we haven't. And I would just say, if that were to become something that the select board wanted us to do, we would need to engage some kind of professional fundraising type of resource.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Peter, do you want me to ask the question that Lou sent?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I
I'm not
don't know
sure
what it is. Surprise us all.
Yeah, you're probably going to say we can't answer that question, but the question is how the administrative portion of town government is, or if the administration portion of town government is preparing for a change from town meeting, and would that kind of a change provide better service to the general public? Not my question.
Oh, Lou. That is not really answerable right now.
If I might, those of us on the town council study committee believe it would be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this has been very, very informative, and I appreciate it. Thanks a lot to both of you for spending this beautiful Saturday morning with us. And at the very least, we're all indoors, and we will have less skin cancer in the future and more information. So thanks a lot, Libby and Brian. And, I'm sitting back and looking at the various governments that I'm subject to. This is one of the better ones, and appreciate the service of you all and the staffs that you've accumulated and that are doing, I think, excellent work. But that's my view. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys were great.
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
And also Denise Cronow has been as a visitor. I don't know if you didn't see her on here, but she's been on the phone. She's been listening to all this discussion as well. So
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think Denise has been a very important member of this community. as is her committee. So update on the Town Council Study Committee. I don't know if there is anything to update at this point.
Okay. Our most recent meeting was on Wednesday, and we're at the point where we're discussing transitioning from select board to town council. So we cover things like election dates, salary, number of candidates. I guess the elections, we're not, first of all, we don't know for sure when or if we're going to have a special town meeting. We had a speaker, Nancy Holmes, who is the Nantucket's town clerk. And she gave us information about possible election dates and so forth. And they're thinking April might be a possible election date. But the state legislature is still trying to decide on their dates. So Nancy said, we really don't want we don't want Nantucket elections at the same time as state legislature. So that's kind of up in the air. As far as approval for a special town meeting, it has not officially been approved that town council can be on that special town meeting warrant, but Nancy thinks it will be approved at some point. And if it is approved, then the special town meeting, she thinks, will probably be the third week in November. Oh, there's a lot of discussion about salary because generally in the Commonwealth, salaries range from 13,000 to maybe 25,000 roughly. And we got a comparison, a state representative makes 70,000. And Tom Dixon, who's on our committee, the Town Council Study Committee, he is always talking about, and it's so true, how much time folks on the select board spend working on every single issue. And it's just mind-blowing. It's hours and hours, 50 hours a week, depending, whatever. So we are kind of stuck on someone from FinCon recommended $100,000 salary to motivate people. And then you have folks recommending 15,000 because we want public servants. During that discussion, we also talked about manpower, if you will. How many people would, first of all, run for a town council? And we decided we need at least 15 candidates, hopefully more, in order to get the 9 that we really want. And then during that discussion, they were talking about, well, how many people are going to be able to become members of the various committees that will be formed under these council men and women. And that's when I mentioned on behalf of us that advocating our value to the community is that no, we cannot vote, but yes, we can participate. And we have a lot of expertise and interest in offering to these various committees that will be developed over time if we do have a town council. Then I think, oh, and we're getting ready. Every time we have a meeting, Joe and our vice chair also meet with the Collins Center, which is guiding us. And we're now at the point where we're discussing, are we ready to present to KP Law? So the chair and the vice chair think that we're ready to at least present the preliminary information to KP Law. And then there's a question of funding, which has to be through the select board. So there were a lot of questions raised through the various issues that I mentioned that we did discuss on Wednesday. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions about where we are at this point, or something that maybe I haven't answered that I can answer?
Yeah,
Patty's
Patty.
hand is up.
Hi, Donna, thanks for doing
hi,
so much
Patty.
work on this. What, did you guys decide on who a representative would be? Are we talking a complete at-large, which is totally the way we're doing it now, and I think that needs a shakeup. But did you decide what you were gonna do?
Yes, we decided against precincts. We decided that it would be at large. Because it's hard to carve up the island fairly. So
Okay.
we figured that the fairer way would be to do it at large.
And
Donna,
how do you propose to get people, mid-island or whatever, if people that run for these things are usually, luminaries in the island, they promote themselves. So you really don't get a cross-section of the needs of the island, because you won't have people, jumping into the mix. It'll stay just the way it has been.
Well, we hope that there will be people encouraged to run no matter where they are. And I don't think that people will just kind of focus in on one area. And also, because of town council, we are going to have a lot of committees. So what may not be compensated in the town councilors, and actually I think it will be, if you're looking for 9 town councilors to fulfill the council, they all are not going to be in one area. You're going to have Mid-Island, you are going to have Mattakit, you are going to have Sconset.
We have that now.
I can't speak to now.
Okay, so we know what the current decision is on that issue. And Donna, first of all, are there any other questions?
yes, I do. Peter,
Yep.
Donna, I believe there's a warrant article, right, on this issue, which is to get a sense of the community,
Yes,
so that at the upcoming ATM annual town meeting, the community will be asked to vote whether or not they think this is a good idea or not. If that vote is not successful, or if there seems to be not sufficient support behind the idea, does it go away then, or what?
no, it does not.
Does it?
What we would do, and this is coming from our chair, is we would evaluate what are perceived issues, pro and con, and then add that to the mix. We are aiming for a special town meeting warrant in November. That's where we want to go.
Is anyone going to speak at the ATM on
Yes.
this subject? Like
Yeah,
Joe?
I think Joe Grouse is
Good.
our chair. And also I've suggested that we even have a one-page, simple ideas of what we're presenting. A lot of times people don't realize the issues that we've addressed, and also how we would like to fulfill those issues, complete those issues. So yeah, so we'll have like a one-page leave behind. Joe has been given, Sarah Alger gave him maybe 5 minutes to speak. We just want a sense. We want the community to be involved in this, and this is one way to do it. And it also raises the how important this issue is, again, in front of our voters. So that's, so we're doing it. And KP Law does have to take a look at everything. We think things will be fine. And that we understood also, if it gets to the state legislature, we learned from the Collins Institute that most of the time the state legislature approves it, a change to town council. So we have to see if the voters are willing, if they want to try this. It's up to the voters, we just keep giving them information to digest, to ask questions.
Okay, Any other questions or comments on this? Thank you, Donna, for sticking with this and bringing us up to date.
My pleasure. You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. We are really sort of short on time because we've been going almost 2 hours. On the review of ATM 2025 citizen-sponsored Article 6768, I'm wondering, our next meeting is set for when? Is it March 5th or something like that?
Yes, we don't have an invited speaker yet, but I think it's,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm wondering if we could, is March 5th still a good date? My plan, quite frankly, was to get through any of these warrant articles before the warrant is, I guess, officially published, which would be what, shortly after that.
Yeah, but I think March 10th is when everybody gets together and it goes to press, but that means that whatever feedback we have would be I'm not sure if it would be included because all of the reviews by FinCom and the planning board have finished their reviews. So that's why those two were listed.
Yeah.
The finance committee has still got a lot of them to review. And I think the ones that the planning board has finished will be reviewed. The short-term rental ones, for example, I think go before the finance committee on the 18th. And then they'll be done as well.
Of February.
Of February. So if we have any feedback to provide to them, whatever it is or it isn't, then that needs to be, I would suggest it be given to the finance committee before they make their
Okay, so we need to do this today.
Yes, and I think we can do it pretty quickly. Also, someone had asked, would I give a quick update on it's also on the agenda about the planning sessions.
Yeah.
Okay, and I can do both of those pretty quickly if you want.
Thank you.
Okay, so the master planning, we talked about this last time, is the kickoff. They had kitchen sessions and those kitchen conversations are going on and they've been extended until the February 21st. I had one and I had about 5 people on and it was recorded and sent in. I don't know how many the town has, but they're transcribing the meeting for us and then we'll review the minutes and then they'll decide to put that forth for all of the different sessions that were run. The good news was when I contacted a lot of people said I already participated in one. So that was a good thing. And it was a mixture of residents and year-round and non-year-round residents. So, and it's very interesting that there really was very little difference, at least in my session, between what the year-round residents and the non-voting taxpayer type people were concerned about or liked about the island and answering those questions. So, happy to share when we get the transcript back with everybody here, if anyone's interested. And then they had a kickoff session on Thursday night down at the Nantucket Inn, where they had a speaker come in from a nonprofit talking about strong towns and how you build strong towns and some of the issues that have arisen in affordable housing is a national problem and that it really traces back a lot to the way zoning was done when people decided that they needed to have zoning. Typically it would start with picking another town as an example and copying theirs and then modifying it. And it ended up, it was a very interesting discussion about how we ended up where we are now, where your core district obviously is what it is. It's been there for hundreds of years. And then when the expansion went out to other places on the island, the way the zoning was done, and I can't go through the whole thing, was an hour-long presentation, basically forces you to have larger homes because the profitability is only realized on the expensive land that you build on if you use your whole footprint. And so it ends up building the wrong kind of housing for local people. And that's kind of where we are. Although there was a lot of suggestions about how that could change going forward. A lot of the new zoning rules that the state has mandated and passed in law are now in the warrant because the town has to modify their zoning to meet what the requirements are for municipalities, passed down from the state. And those are pushing more into denser use, so smaller houses in little communities, or they're actually it got really complicated, but the point is to try and create the zoning or mandate certain zoning features that will encourage smaller building, more density, more community, little tiny communities and neighborhoods that are not like the typical suburban sprawl or big trophy houses kind of thing. So it was very interesting concept to start thinking about that. So that's where they are, and they're going to continue to move forward on that. So, and then on the articles that were mentioned here for town meeting, there are 4 short-term rental articles. There's none from the town. They're all sponsored by different citizens. And the ones that have been for the planning board are the zoning ones. They have the entire lot of them will go to FinCom to be discussed, as I said, on the 18th. So the first one, which is basically codifying what the Zoning Board of Appeals decision was on the Grape and the Keith cases. It's basically taking that remand decision at the zoning board and making it part of zoning, which is basically saying that redefining a term called Nantucket vacation rentals and saying that they are legal and whoops, Peter must have dropped out here. Everywhere, and they have to follow all of the rules in the bylaws. So that is one article that's gotten a positive review by the planning board and still yet hasn't come before the finance committee. The other one that was a zoning got a negative approval. It's kind of a lot of it may look familiar from what came out of the short-term rental work group. 10-day but it has a residency requirement in it. And that's something that we have always taken, have had problems with. So that one there, and I can put them up if anybody wants to look at them, but that was put forward by Fritz McClure. That one got a negative recommendation for that and other reasons that were in there is requiring a minimum of 7-day rentals in 7 days in the summer, a minimum of 3 days in the off season, 30-day residency in the home, which can be satisfied by you or family or friends or anybody you're not charging to be there. And it had some other, let's see, it also could be, you can also rent for 6 months or more, and that would give you that residency. So, but that one got a negative feedback or negative recommendation, take no action recommendation from
Ash, Kathy, can you give the numbers on those that you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, 67 and 68
Okay.
are the 2 zoning orders. So the first one, the Carolyn Balzer article is 67, and that's the codifying.
I have the book. I'm just trying to look while you're talking.
68 is Fritz McClure. So what they've done in the warrant is they've put the zoning always comes before general bylaws in the warrant. So they put the 2 zoning
First, so
short-term
66 and
first,
67.
and then right after that, the very first general bylaws are the short-term rental ones as well. So they'll all come in a row.
Okay.
And then the general bylaw ones is basically if you took the Fritz McClure article and you just said, no, this is a general bylaw, it's got the same restrictions in it, the same residency and all those other restrictions. And it was submitted as a general bylaw. Problem with that one is that town council has found it to be not in a valid format. It still goes forward to town meeting, but it's not in a valid format because it is got a definition, or it's trying to redefine the terminology that's in zoning, and you can't do that in a general bylaw. So I think the Fritz McClure one and they're identical. It's almost like the Fritz McClure one, if it doesn't pass, which needs a 2/3 majority, you could do the same thing in a general bylaw. I mean, looks to me like that's what that is, but I don't know. It's not submitted by the same folks. So those two right there are the ones that have the residency requirement in them. So it would be 68 and 69. And then, is that right? 66 is the Carolyn Balta one, 67 is the Fritz McClure one, 68 are the two general bylaw ones. The one I just spoke about is 68, and then 69 was submitted by Matthew Peel. And that is also not gone to the planning board because it's not zoning. That has a whole, I don't know, it's like a smorgasbord of different kinds of restrictions. It has a cap in it, which is the most unique thing. So, and of 1,350 short-term rentals, don't know where the number came from, and I don't know how many there are right now. All I know is there's only 846 registered with the town, which seems very, very low. But I FOIA'd the information a few days ago, and that's what it is. So I don't know what the number is really, how many there are. And those two, it's got a restriction on limits and it's a very smorgasbord of different kinds of restrictions. And I think I don't think there's no residency requirement in that one. And I think it was what I heard Matthew Peel say at a FinCom meeting was he kind of put lots of different ideas in there, just because you can always take things out and make it less restrictive at town meeting on the floor. So it's just sort of a smorgasbord of ideas that he was willing to negotiate or take off out of it at town meeting floor. So that's what those things are. So I think the only ones that, given the fact that we don't like things that have to do with residency requirements, or think that those are issues, that those are really the only two that we might want to take a position on. Peter, you're muted.
I muted myself so you wouldn't hear me blowing my nose. The 67 and 68. 67 is, I think, just the. I'm getting a little bit confused because we have in our agenda 67 and 68, and 67 is. I think is the codification of the. I don't know.
No, 66 is the codification of the ZBA ruling. 67 and 68 are the ones that have the residency requirements in them.
Okay. So then, if to the extent that they would violate the anti-discrimination provisions of the Constitution, I take it that we can comment on those negatively, as we have in the past on others. Is that seems our policy so far has been, if the provisions discriminate against non-residents, we will advise against them. And I think that we ought to continue that policy, and I'm not sure that we need to do anything in this meeting, just to continue to take a consistent position.
Well, I'll take a look. I haven't seen the new ones. I'll take a close look and be ready the next time we meet to give because we have some, I mean, the special town meeting the town meeting isn't not until what, May? So we have a little time.
Right, but you may want to advise the finance committee.
Yeah.
Give
When do they,
advice.
I'm sorry, when did
They meet on Tuesday.
this Tuesday?
Yes.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little short. All right. Well, I'll see what I can do on Monday.
Okay.
Okay.
Then if I think that should be satisfactory, and so we're now on to the next. I think we'll skip the next thing, our priorities, because we just are really out of time. And anything from the PR committee?
Yes, I just have one thing. If I could ask iPad 1531159 if you are still here, how you heard about this meeting and did you get anything out of it?
That person on iPad is still here, but I don't know that.
Yeah, no, they're muted.
Yeah.
The only thing, it just, you know, for 30 seconds, we did have an awful lot of people at the previous meeting, like over 20 or so, I think, because of the issue. And we got one person who runs a lobbying firm in Washington who was actually quite helpful as we developed a position paper on the issue of the right whale. So maybe at some future meeting, we'll talk about sort of having a database of island people who are experts. We talked about that about a year ago, but anyway, I don't want to make this go on any longer, but I just wanted to raise that point.
Okay, so on that position paper, we I think this was circulated. We did put together I think a 2-page paper that we sent to the select board and to some others. And as you all may know, that tipped the balance in favor of getting rid of the speed limit on Nantucket Sound, and we declared victory. And it was all because of our 2-page paper.
Absolutely.
But on a more serious note, we did get a letter of thanks from the town for doing that, for weighing in, and the town sent out sort of a message of thanks to a number of the entities that had commented consistent with the town's position on that. And so thanks to all of you as well. The future guest speakers. So if we're going to meet on the 5th, I can see if I can get in a short time a person from the Coastal Resiliency. Gary, maybe you can suggest who that should be or help with that. If
we can get Leah.
Yeah.
Although it's Saturday mornings, I don't know, but we
It's-
can.
It's
Actually,
March
the
1st.
date should be the 8th, I think.
No,
not
it's the
5th.
first. It's
The
the first.
3rd?
The 3rd,
The first. March
first.
1st.
Okay.
the 1st
That's
of
the-
March.
March 1st, yes.
Yes, that's the first Saturday of the month. That's what we had chosen.
Yeah, that's coming right up. Okay, so March 1st, we'll see if we can get somebody. Otherwise, Gary, you're going to have to do it all.
Yeah.
Coastal Resiliency.
If you'd like, I can send you the 3rd and 4th quarter reports. I don't know. I sent the 1st quarter, 2nd quarter reports, but no one raised any questions about them. And they have since issued a 3rd and 4th quarter report.
Yeah, if you just send us the links.
I
that would be
will.
great. And if your, I think your swimming pool is in the background, if that doesn't
Yes, it is.
overwhelm you.
I've been
and
there
further
every day last week. It's been fabulous.
Good.
So do we want to have a backup in case Leah can't come, or is Gary our backup?
Gary's our backup.
Okay.
Well, I think the subject matter is going to be coastal resilience, right? And I don't know about you, but having this is like a 2-hour and 15-minute meeting right now, and getting this back down to around an hour might be nice for Saturday mornings. I thought today's meeting was very, very worthwhile.
Yeah.
And Scott, I think you raised these end game issue in the first place, and we have information, but we don't know what the end game is.
Well, if I can suggest, I mean, I'd like to, the next meeting, I'd like to reserve some time for just committee discussion of what we heard today. I think that's very important. I mean, because I think we need to be thinking about what our, what our recommendations may be, if we should make any, but I think just listening to this without talking about it is, among ourselves is not worthwhile. We need to discuss it.
I thought today was stunning.
Mhm.
A lot of questions. Yeah, good.
Okay, it'd be interesting to know more about what stunned you.
Numbers.
I think it's worth having a discussion because I think we're getting on a pretty slippery slope here in terms of, what the capital budget requires over the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, we're talking about 500, 600, 700 million of potential debt, of which 95% of it is above the 2.5%. What are our priorities and what should we share with the committee about the priorities? Because the trajectory is not particularly good given the capital structure and the financing sources.
Yeah.
And you can rest assured when we're well attuned to this, the general public, meaning our quote unquote constituents, the rest of the non-voting taxpayers are not as attuned to this, but when they begin to see their tax bills, they will be. And I think we owe it to them as well as ourselves to have a full discussion on this. So I think we ought to really, give it, maybe an hour to the resiliency, but I think a good hour to this next time as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree. I think we have to become conservative, especially with that whole sentence in red about municipal taxes and codes and the new administration. I mean, that's a big question mark.
Yeah, and as you may recall, during the last time that the presidency was in the Republican Party, they did away with SALT, the state and local tax.
They brought it down to $10,000.
And this municipal interest is basically the same thing all over again, right? It's not the same thing, but it's in principle, it's the same thing.
Although they're talking about raising that SALT number in the next tax.
Talk is cheap.
It's New York delegation. It's a New York delegation that's leading the fight.
Yeah, but
that tells you something. Yeah.
Even if they don't touch it at all, just the sheer amount of the debt service is going to be astronomical. We're talking about 30, 40 million a year of debt service.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just hard to sustain on an island the size of Nantucket.
And I think it sounds very optimistic, but I think when you're dealing with numbers and revenue and taxing, I think one has to be fiscally conservative.
Well, taking this, the assignment for everybody for next time on this subject, we had 2 links. One was to the presentation that they put up on the screen today and went through. The other one was to something called the Capital Improvements Plan, fiscal year 25 through 34. And that is much more granular than what we just went through today. It's about 5 or 6 sheets of crossing information as to what all these expenditures really are and where they are currently in the next 10 years, thought that where they will take place. And when you add it all up, it adds up to $1 billion worth of expenditures. And I think, you can go through, and a lot of this is just the normal type of thing to keep the place running. And some of it is moral, as we heard today. Moral decision is to mortgaging the entire island for a certain kind of benefit that doesn't seem to make financial sense, and so on and so forth. But I think to intelligently discuss the capital needs of the island, one has to look at this and also then remember that we're in a tax-averse country that has all kinds of deferred maintenance, as well as this island. Nobody wants to pay for anything, and so you have deferred maintenance that if you don't do it, and a lot of that is capital spending, you're not going to have a pleasant environment.
If you think about the coastal resilience stuff, which, as I said, I'll send you the third and fourth quarter reports. We are talking about the needs of hundreds of millions of dollars to save the island. That's the bad news.
Yeah.
Good news, if you want to call it good news, is it's not happening immediately. And so the only immediate concerns that I think we need to address are the flooding in Washington Street. So we're talking immediate needs are 0 to 10 years, okay? That's the immediate needs, and we have to take care of that. But long-term, it's 100 or more millions of dollars, a few $100 million to really save the historic nature of this island. And because some of these effects don't take place until 2050, we're never going to get anybody's attention. If we can't get people to focus today on spending $105 million, and by the way, by the time they're done, it'll be $125 million, on taking care of 45 old people, half of whom have dementia, right? Sit around, they don't know where they are anyway, right? Then
And I'm not sure it's 45. I'm not sure they fill up.
Yeah, I mean,
they have
the cost
They
per
always
bed
argue
is
with me. I
pretty
always say 40
astronomical.
beds. They say, no, we have 45 beds, but of course not all being used. We can't get people to focus on that. So how are we going to get them to focus on stuff that's going to happen in 2050? I think it's a tough slog.
Yeah, but you know, I think people will focus on it. What was revealing today to me was most of this is pretty opaque coming out of the town. You know, and when you see it all laid out in front of you, there's an educational component here, I think, that we owe to our colleagues that are non-resident taxpayers, because if you just back of the envelope pencil these numbers, there's no way what they want to do is sustainable.
Right.
You know,
That's a good question. Yeah.
Peter, may I suggest, I mean, we're already talking about this. We might want the whole meeting to discuss this.
I would think so.
You know, and in addition, we may want to put forth some sort of action, whether it's a letter or something. So I think we need a whole meeting to discuss this.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy not to invite somebody. Gary.
I'll send the reports to you and then
Send the reports
Okay.
But I also think that other than having a wonderful discussion amongst ourselves to follow this discussion, we need to be thinking about what is the work product that we would hope would come out of this discussion that goes beyond our committee.
Well, I mean, our mission is to give advice to the board. And if you know, I'm not prejudging this, but if we come up with any possible suggestions that they may not have looked at or thoughts, I mean, then we can put them into a letter. I mean, I'm not sure we can do much more than that. That we can also think about, you know, how do we educate, if we feel strongly about it, how do we educate the non-voting taxpayers who aren't listening or watching this? That's another possible, you know, that we send out a letter to the newspaper or whatever.
All of
Yeah,
these
I mean,
things are
actually, we
already on
want
the
to
warrant.
educate the voting taxpayer because they're the ones who are going to vote on it.
Well, yeah, we're gonna educate them to say, hey, lay it off on these non-voting taxpayers.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, all of these
that's
things are on
coming.
the warrants already. So it's a matter of, and they're put there by the town because people demanded to do that. So they're throwing it out there. I don't know that they want to do the our island home, but they have to do something. So the voters will decide what they're gonna do, and but we. it's-
Okay. I'll wait. So tell me what.
Peter, you go on mute.
Yeah.
Peter's on the telephone.
It's all right. I muted him. Now he's unmuted. I can unmute him. There we go.
Ah, you have the power.
Yeah, you're muted, Peter. I muted you.
Okay, thanks. I have an air conditioning issue here. I'm very aware of, you know, having to make maintenance expenditures to keep going.
Yes.
Uh,
So
do you- Do
Do
you
you
think
want to invite
considering,
Leah to a different one, to our one after that, so we have that lined up?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's fine.
So,
Okay. I'll send the reports in the interim anyway, you'll have them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, so I missed a little bit of this, but I take it we're gonna have a basic discussion of the capital issues and financing on Nantucket next time. And then maybe after that, we're gonna ask for the climate person to come?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I got it. Good.
And that would be April 5th.
Yeah.
No,
Do we
yeah.
need to have the meeting in 2 weeks? Can we move it to 3 weeks or is that?
Nah, I think it's easier to keep it to the regular schedule. We see keep missing.
Okay.
I mean, actually this one, because it's fresh in our minds, it might be worth having
Yeah.
sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and then we can control the length of it because we don't have, this is only one thing on the agenda, basically.
Yeah.
So we're on for March 1st, correct?
Oh, yeah,
March 1st.
March 1st. yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Good.
And do
Well-
we have any public comment? I don't think so.
I think they left us.
Yeah.
Calling the realtor.
Adjourn, motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
See you guys in 2 weeks.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Farewell, everyone.
You.
Goodbye.
Kathy, remember to turn off the
Bye-bye.
recording. Remember to turn off the recording, Kathy.
Yes.